So in this video, I wanted to show you a quick overview of what we call our Sales Insights platform and how it can be used by people to improve their sales conversions and really give you a feedback loop onto what is going on with your sales process and in your sales conversations right now. So let's dive into it. In this report for this video, which was simply just uploaded into our system, and we do have automations to make that even easier. You'll see the video playing here in real time. You'll actually see the transcript happening here, and we've also got some basic analysis that's happening on the right hand side. And we work with our clients to even personalize what's most important to display to you there. So for example, we're identifying the sections automatically. So every question and every answer that is asked within the video, within the conversation, or the audio file is automatically extracted and identified. So we're actually helping you identify what is the emotion associated with each question. So as a salesperson, how did you ask it? Were you curious? Were you fearful? Were you doubting? What was the emotion you're portraying when you're asking that question? But also the emotional response of the person who answered that question. And you can dive a lot more into this to understand the tonality in which you're using to ask your questions and how that's impacting the answers you're getting. So that's some of the information there. So as I mute this here and I just click play, for example, you'll actually see how the transcript is changing. It's evolving in detail, and it's analyzing the locus of control. So, and locus of control means, are you asking the questions and are they speaking from a fact that's internally under their control, or are they looking for others for external information? So as you can see right there, that answer actually had some sadness connected to it. The question here has some surprise associated with it. So that's a good way to ask, like, are you asking questions with the right inflection, the right tonalities? And when you're looking here, like as he's talking now, that there's some sadness as to how he was answering those questions. So you can have a lot of fun with analyzing that and diving in a lot more deeper. So I will pause that because it'll keep playing and keep evolving. So one of the things here, you'll actually see the personality types. You'll see that the two different personality styles of the sales rep and the client. You'll see how they overlaid and how they are able to connect. So we can actually see that if I look at the client that was on this call, you'd say that there would be predominantly an eagle, and an eagle owl would probably be the overlap, where the sales rep was more eagle peacock. So there was some good overlap there, and that happened. This was a role play sales call. So this was some of the sales training that people are doing, where they're role playing, and therefore understanding that impact is really important. So when we go through here and look at the clout, this is the influence you have over somebody and the associated connection with that. So at the start of the call, you can actually see the sales rep had little influence over the client, even though they were role playing. But towards the end of the call, there was certainly a lot more influence. So the close would have been successful, or should have been successful, as the influence increased. When you look at the emotions, it's actually quite fascinating. So we see the summary of emotions here, which gives us some insight. But when we dive into this a little bit further, you look at the positive emotions that both parties exhibited. There was a lot of gratitude, a bit of joy, a bit of love, a bit of admiration, and calmness was high, which is important. Being calm and not being super excited. But one of the things I noticed, which was quite interesting here, is that the sales rep was exhibiting in their conversation a high amount of boredom. Boredom doesn't mean that you had interest or were maintaining interest in the person you're communicating with. So that's something that sales rep could be working on as they evolve their conversations, to remain interested in the person they're talking to and not allowing that boredom of the conversation, boredom of who they're talking to, start to take over, because that will actually decrease your influence. You can actually see from the questions they're asking overall, they were able to get the salesperson. So if I unclick that one, you'll be able to get the client. They got the client into an emotional state of sadness. There was a little bit of fear And there certainly was some disgust with their actions on what they had taken. Disgust is a very important emotion that to be using and to be leveraging. And if you trigger disgust incorrectly, it can cause that person to abandon and literally go act in the opposite direction. So I know they were role playing here on this call, so they're certainly role playing closes, role playing objections, and role playing certain things. So it would be interesting to analyze where this disgust emotion was triggered, how it was triggered, and how it was overcome, if it was overcome. And that's something that's important that this data can actually provide for you. So from this, you can actually see also the associated influence and how the influence here. Obviously, the sales rep did have a consistent amount of influence over the client, and the influence grew over the call. And the authenticity certainly was there and established and grew and rolled. The sales rep was consistent with their authenticity, which was great. And that's what you want to see. One of the big things that you'll notice is if you roll in and out of your sales scripts, your authenticity can go up and then crash because you go to reading a sales script where you need to be able to practice delivering your script with authenticity and believing every part of what you're saying, specifically if your sales script is focused around asking questions. The happiness sandwich is unique to us, and that's because people remember what the start of something and the end of something. So for example, we can look at the summary of the call, which is great, but like what happened from the emotional aspect from the sales rep. So the sales rep was on an equilibrium there, which was good. And the client certainly started happy, experienced a whole wave of emotions in the middle of the call, and then dove into being happy at the end. We never want to see a client end in an unhappy emotion at the end of the call, because that emotion can fester and cause them to ghost you. So one of the things here when you're looking at drives, there was an interesting drive overlap. The overlap here didn't really connect. So this may have come down to, once again, this was a role play call, but however, the language that was being used by the sales rep may not have fully connected with this client because of that. And you can see that in more detail if I unselect that. You can see that that's what the salesperson, or that's what the client was using, and this is what the sales rep was using. And when you overlay them again in detail, you see that detail right there. And the sales rep was using a lot more reward, affiliation, achievement language. And one of the things you want to be asking is, okay, if that's the drives you're using in your presentation, is that really what's most important to that personality style? And if we remember and we look at the personality style of the client, they are certainly our eagle style. So with that owl, they're a thinker, they're quiet, they're conservative, and what this shows you what they're motivated here. They want information, rules, and predictability, where the eagle are the doers, they're the action takers. So you need to be asking, well, if I know that this is the personality style, how am I delivering my message in a way that is actually connecting to the drives that that personality style wants? And then you got a needs analysis, which you see there's a good overlap on the needs analysis from everything that was covered from the conversations and how that worked. So there was quite good mapping there. The cognitive processing is interesting because cognitive processing means is in our presentation, how are we turning on that fire hose where we are overwhelming our person? And if we're overwhelming them, they're having to think too much. If they think too much, it forces the decision-making process to be much harder because you've literally turned on a fire hose of information and drowned them. And you want to avoid that. So the thing is with cognitive processing, we've also compared it to openness. So how open was the person you're communicating with to actually receiving the information you're talking about? And there's a great balance here. We actually want to see more open than cognitive processing. If your cognitive processing is high, you've got to dumb down your delivery. You've got to simplify your delivery. You've got to do less possible delivery. And you certainly want to make sure people are open to hearing the ideas and insight that you have, and not just pitching. We find that in a lot of calls where people are just pitch, the cognitive processing is much higher, and the openness is actually decreasing. And that's not a good thing to see, because that means you're actually creating a lot of sales resistance and a lot of sales pressure for people to be involved. Locus of control is always fascinating to understand, is where is your focus? And it's an important metric. So when you look at the how this conversation was happening here, the sales rep got the client to be focusing inward emotions, inward responsibility, inward controls, and therefore making an intrinsic decision to take action rather than an extrinsic. So they weren't looking necessarily to blame somebody, they weren't looking for outside motivations, you weren't just looking for specials, discounts, or pricing. You're actually looking for an emotional motivation to create a better quality client. So the sales rep is more outward focused, focusing on them, which is great. They're not just focused on themselves and telling their own story and boring the person they're talking to tears. The tentative is an interesting dynamic as well, because with that you can actually see through the language you're using, how are you sitting on the fence, or how are you actually leveraging action-taking words. Like, how committed to you, or are you giving those fence-sitting answers that doesn't really have an emotional buy-in or a logic buy-in? And remember, we believe with the behavior sales model that you want to be more emotionally driven. And this is just the tip of the iceberg from the Sales Insights. And as you can see from the Sales Insights platforms, you got all the data on the dashboard up here. At a snippet, you can see that in this call here, there was a negative emotion that was expressed from the sales rep, and therefore that's something you may want to address in detail. You can actually see clout, you can see sync, and you can gain access into any of these insights. So this is just what's possible from within the behavior sales platform. We're super excited to be rolling this out and releasing this platform to make your sales more effective and give you the insights and the feedback loop you need to help you advance and evolve your communication. So if you've got any questions, reach out to the team, help@behaviorsales.com. That's help@behaviorsales.com. And put your questions and comments below, and we will make sure we do our best to answer them. So talk to you soon.